Welcome to Sober and Lit.
The podcast for women who want to get sober, stay sober, and live a life that's way more lit than it ever was with wine.
We're your hosts, Ruby and Susan, two alcohol freedom coaches keeping it real with stories, tools, and zero judgment.
Whether you're sober curious or all in, you're in the right place.
Let's feel lit alcohol free. Welcome back to the Feel It Alcohol Free podcast. And we have a very special guest today. I want to introduce you to Dr. Brooke Scheller. She's a doctor of clinical nutrition, the founder of Functional Sobriety, and the author of How to Eat to Change How You Drink. And Dr. Scheller has dedicated her career to revolutionizing the approach to alcohol recovery and holistic well-being. Inspired by her journey to sobriety in 2021, Dr. Scheller embarked on a mission to empower others to reclaim their lives through nutrition and functional medicine. She crafted an innovative approach called Functional Sobriety that not only supports alcohol-free living, but also fosters profound improvements in brain health, mood regulation, energy levels, focus, gut health, and hormone balance. Welcome, Brooke. Welcome.
Yay. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, ladies, for having me. And I'm excited for our chat today.
Yeah. And we both have your book, which we're going to, if you're watching, we love your book, by the way. We both were like, we have to have Brooke on.
Thank you.
Just to get started, though, I'd love to go, take us back to your relationship with alcohol and what did it look like for you and maybe why you decided to change?
Yeah, well, I love sharing this story, and I love when people ask, are you okay sharing your story? I am one of the most transparent people about this topic in my field anyway, in the nutrition and health space. And if you read the book and you read more about my story, I always talk about how I felt like I was living a double life for so long. I felt like, by day, I am this doctor of nutrition, I'm practicing health, I'm wanting to be healthy, eating healthy. And then by night, I'm a drinker. And that is not an uncommon experience for many women who are interested in health and wellness and yet still finding themselves kind of stuck on this habit of drinking alcohol. And my story is kind of early teens. I started drinking. I drank heavily through high school, college, found all of the drinking friends, and really continued that lifestyle beyond college into my early 30s. And it's never hard to find the people who drink, even in health and wellness. You can always find your people, as we say. So I really surrounded myself with just about everyone who was also a drinker. Thankfully, my story does not include other substances. I have a father who is in recovery from drugs, and I always credit that experience to being something that thankfully kept me away from other substances. But I felt like I needed to prove that I could drink alcohol and not have an addiction and not be like my parent. And sure enough, ended up in the end in 2021, really being on my knees and coming from pre-pandemic, where I was probably a 5-6 day a week drinker, to a daily drinker. And that time started creeping up from 5 o'clock to 3 o'clock to 2 o'clock to noon. And I'm really grateful that I didn't last long in that daily early morning drinking, only for really about a few months, because it exhausted me trying to live that way. And if you're listening and you've experienced that, you know how exhausting that experience is. And yet, at the same time, how trapped we are in that experience. And especially if we've surrounded ourselves with drinkers and it's been such a through line in our stories, it's really hard to imagine a life without it. And I, like many others, went into 12-step program because that was one of the few options that existed even just a few years ago. And in my own experience, I'm really grateful to be one of the stories of the people who came in, put it down, and haven't picked it up since. Relapse has not been part of my story and hopefully will not be part of my story. And it didn't take very long for me to gain a ton of clarity around how much alcohol was limiting me. physically, mentally, big time, emotionally, big time, and also even in things in my career. I'm someone who, of course, loved self progression and went to school, got a lot of degrees, and really found that it was removal of alcohol that allowed me to catapult to that next level of my life. And I love sharing that story with others because I see it happen all the time with other women and men as well.
Yeah. Your story is so relatable. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
It's so amazing. We tell people this all the time on the podcast. We've never met someone who's sober who just goes, it's okay. It's always like, it's amazing. It totally up-leveled my life. But it's so hard when you're on the other side to believe it. And so it's just like, yes, just take the step and try it and see how much it improves your life, because it improves everyone's life.
And it doesn't take long to do that. But it does take awareness and paying attention to those signs and shifts in the universe and what's kind of being put in front of you. One interesting thing about my story is that about 9 months prior to quitting drinking, I had been asked to author a textbook chapter on integrative approaches to substance use disorders. And as a doctor of nutrition, I was asked to write about nutrition for substance use disorders. Now, meanwhile, here I am, glass of wine, working on this chapter, not knowing that soon I would end up getting sober and then use those tools I'd researched to support my journey. And I was 3 months into my alcohol-free journey when I had the idea to write this book. I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know even how to go about it. But the idea, I have to write a book about this, hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night, random. And all of a sudden I'm Googling how to find a book agent, New York City, and Googling how to pitch a book agent. And this was before ChatGPT, which now I'm sure you can just ChatGPT this information and get it pretty quickly. But I, through that process, ended up finding someone who believed in my work. And it has really completely transformed my journey and been a huge part, I think, of my success in sobriety has been finding a purpose within it.
Yeah, I love that. And nutrition is such an important part of an alcohol-free journey. One question I really want to ask, when someone stops drinking, what do our bodies most need in those early days of going alcohol-free?
This is such a great question. And I want to start and preface by saying, and just kind of adding to how you mentioned that nutrition is an important part of this journey, but it's not something that we often think of as the first thing to kind of explore. But the reason why it is so profound to me is that we do so much work in this space, much needed work around addressing mental health and trauma and behavior change. But I really believe that the physiology is 50% of the puzzle. That alcohol, when we learn about alcohol from a nutrition standpoint, we learn about it as a macronutrient, like proteins, carbs, and fats, which if you think about it in that way, it's a nutrition topic. It's something that we are taking in just like any other substance, food, beverage that we're consuming. And so I really believe that we need to think about it in that way, where when we consume alcohol on a regular basis, our body makes a lot of shifts in its processes in order to metabolize this alcohol through. And so it is creating changes in our physiology that when we take it out can be a little jarring to the body. We've all been there where when you first get sober, you're usually exhausted. Usually you don't feel great right away. Some people do, and others do not. And if you're on an alcohol-free journey and you still don't feel the benefits, that usually tells me that we need to address something within the physiology. There's something missing. There's a piece of the puzzle that is not found yet. And for me, it's usually looking at and addressing some of these physiological changes. And so really that comes into a lot of different categories that I talk about in the book. But one thing that I'll start with is just simply nutrient deficiencies. And when we drink, it is a very energy intensive process in the body. And we deplete out really all of the critical nutrients, our B vitamins, our vitamin C, our vitamin D, our magnesium, our zinc. We could go on for many more minutes talking about the deficiencies. And when we quit drinking, there's really this opportunity for us to restore some balance and restore some of these nutrient levels. So I am a big proponent of using supplementation, but also really strategically using food to support this system as well. And that really gets into a lot of the simple tips and tricks that I like to talk about, like even just simply having more consistent meals throughout the day, because we may be, when we're experiencing cravings, we may actually be experiencing low blood sugar. That manifests as a craving. And it's going to make it really hard for us to say no to that trigger or that craving when our body is sending a signal saying, hey, I need something. So that's where nutrition really plays an important role in this process. And it doesn't need to be huge, massive changes, going keto, cutting out all the sugar and all of those kind of drastic measures. It's really about looking at, we're already eating 3 times or so a day. How do we structure that in a way that might help us feel better and take away some of those cravings?
I see a lot of clients that, food comes up. It's very intertwined with drinkers. And a lot of times I've noticed that people drink and they don't eat, right? And then they get down to like 100 pounds. But I was the opposite. I drank and ate a lot and gained a lot of weight. But either way, I feel like we're not getting all the right nutrition, vitamins. Is that correct?
That is correct. And there's a few things I want to point to there, Ruby. One is that, yes, regardless of if you're not eating much or you're overeating, most of the time when we're overeating, we're not eating nutritious things. So we're very rarely like drinking and eating giant salads and having these like healthy meals.
For the fried foods, right?
Yeah, not to mention
like
hangover food. Right?
Yeah, it's like snacks and it's candy or cakes or whatever it might be, right? Like the things that don't really provide a lot of nutrition. And so there is going to be some level of malnourishment, probably based on what we're eating when we're drinking. But also, alcohol is very disruptive to the digestive system. Yes. It is absorbed mostly in the stomach, a little bit in the small intestine. This is also where most of our nutrients are absorbed. So when we are having a substance come in that's kind of decreasing the function of our digestive system, we're not going to absorb those nutrients as effectively, even if we're taking them. So I get this question a lot. Can I take a supplement and still drink? Not necessarily, because it isn't really repairing that system or that process. Likely there are still going to be some deficiencies. But also, as I mentioned, alcohol is really disruptive to the system, and it creates an even higher need for these nutrients in order to just kind of be at baseline. So again, because the breakdown and the metabolism of alcohol is really energy intensive, it's also really damaging to the system. So we need more of these nutrients to kind of combat that stress.
So the big question is then, what should people be eating? They're going alcohol free and they're maybe trying the first month alcohol free. What should they be eating?
Great question. And in the book, I talk about that kind of 30-day initial period and taking time off. And I really believe from an overall physical standpoint that in order to start feeling some of the benefits, it's going to take somewhere around 30 days to get you maybe feeling good. And that's okay. But there are definitely things that we can do from a nutrition standpoint to support that. Now, one of the easy kind of basic things that I suggest to start is working on more consistent meals throughout the day. So I always suggest never going more than 3 or 4 hours or so without having something to eat. And this is because our alcohol use has an influence on our blood sugar levels. Blood sugar, we often hear about in the context of diabetes or heart disease, but we don't often think about it from a standpoint of cravings. And one thing that also happens when we consume alcohol on a frequent basis is it has an influence on our blood sugar levels and can contribute to low blood sugar, or what we call hypoglycemia. And so that means that we may have a tendency to get more of those low blood sugar moments. And I usually talk about these like in the context of that Snickers bar commercial, like hungry, why wait? You're hangry, you're going to chew someone's head off, you're irritable, you're anxious, you're tired. That experience is often a manifestation of low blood sugar, but it is also one of the reasons why we drink. Right? We feel irritable, we feel stressed, we feel tired. And if we have like a long, stressful day, what do? We want to like have a glass of wine to take the edge off. And usually we're actually hungry. We haven't eaten in several hours. Stress has now created some of these blood sugar changes too. And so by having more consistent meals throughout the day, we can really keep a more stable blood sugar and kind of avoid those periods where maybe we have to tap more into the willpower and the hanging on to the steering wheel to say no. So even just something as simple as having an afternoon snack, if that's the time that you crave alcohol. I have clients who say that that has cured their happy hour cravings. Yeah. Just something as simple as eating during that time before picking up a drink.
Yes. That's the first thing that I tell clients. Protein. And have a protein snack at 3 or 4 o'clock and just see what you notice. And
yes, it is transformative for a lot of people. And that's the other piece of those consistent meals that you called out, Susan, is the protein and making sure that you're having a source of protein at each of those meals and snacks, stabilizing that blood sugar. It's going to help avoid those cravings. It's also going to help keep you full for longer, more even keel emotionally, energy-wise, so that we're kind of avoiding those moments where we're feeling a little less in control. And I also think it's really important to point out something too, Ruby, that you had mentioned that about feeling like you want to eat more when you drink, which is that something really interesting in the science talks about the influence of alcohol on our hunger and satiety hormones. And there's actually links to genetics that code for hunger and satiety hormones and their connection to alcohol use disorder and alcohol use. It's really when you start to look at these pieces, you go, these two things are not separate. These two things are very, very closely linked together. And so my goal is always to get us to think more about food as part of this and not as like this outside piece of the puzzle, that the two are actually very closely connected.
Yeah, I've not shared with you before, but Susan knows that I actually gained a lot of weight even before my addiction took hold and I had bariatric surgery. But when you said hunger and satiation, I never felt full. And I think there's like this piece. I always thought there was something broken with me, but now that I'm alcohol free and I really eat a lot of protein, good fats, lots of vegetables, I feel healed. So I just want to share to everybody out there listening that you can heal from this by eating the right foods.
Well, and the interesting thing about that is there's a relationship in some of the research as well between bariatric surgery and the increased risk of alcohol use disorder.
Absolutely.
That it actually, there's something going on there that either the addiction switches in some way, but again, it's physiological. So it is it's the fact that the bariatric surgery is probably not addressing maybe that physiological imbalance that's happening. It's creating this kind of like a shortcut, if you will, to managing hunger, but it isn't necessarily addressing what is that thing that is creating this intense desire, and that then kind of manifests in a different way.
Yeah. I know you mentioned the supplements, but I started to write the list: B and C and D and magnesium and zinc. But what would be the few basics, like the absolute basics that someone should or could take during this first 30 days or ongoing? I mean, I'm still taking like lots of supplements.
Yeah. And it's a tricky topic because you always hear there's this new thing, there's this new supplement that's going to solve all of your problems. It's going to save you. It's, the thing that you've been missing all along, right? And the marketing is very, very clever in that way of supplements. And I'm a big proponent of supplements, but using them really strategically. And in a lot of folks, I actually get them down off of a lot of what they're taking and kind of rebuild back up from there, because sometimes there's overlaps with taking different things and all of that. And because this is a question and was a question that I get really often, we have functional sobriety supplement kits for people who are either early on in their journey, if they're kind of under 6 months, if they're over 6 months, if they experience cravings, if they have mood imbalances that go along with that, just to simplify things for people and make it a little bit easier to figure out what are the right things to take. But there are some really good basics, I think, across the board that most people can benefit from, especially in the early stages. One of them is a high quality B vitamin complex. And I put most people on that because there's no harms in taking it. If you get extra, you're just going to urinate it out. Within the B complex are many nutrients like B12 and folate that play an important role in mood and energy. Vitamin B3, which is one of the very, very important nutrients that supports the production of energy in the body. So our cells producing energy. And that doesn't just mean physical energy, although that is included, but the energy that is needed for your body to work, for it to metabolize out excess alcohol byproducts, to metabolize hormones, to do all of the good things that our body does. So a good high quality B complex is really, really beneficial for most people. I also am a proponent of checking the vitamin D levels or having someone go to their doc and get the vitamin D levels checked, because I do see those low in many. And that is another one that's closely associated with mood, anxiety. And we want to make sure that that's not a factor if that's a symptom. I also do use omega-3s very often. I think as a society, hear more and more about omega-3s and their benefits for the brain and the cardiovascular system. Very supportive of mood, very supportive of detox and regulation of kind of toxin removal in the body. But there's also some really interesting research that shows that omega-3s can decrease alcohol cravings or kind of enhance that sobriety experience in the first several months. So big proponent of adding that one. There's few ways to get the omega-3s, but I prefer the fish oil. It's kind of the most potent way to get that in. And you can eat fish and get this omega-3 as well, but you do need to be consuming fish a few times a week to make sure you're getting it. A lot of times it's tricky for people to get in that much fish. So I like to recommend it as a supplement.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm like, so glad. I'm like writing these down. I'm like, I take all these.
Yeah.
Good.
Like, yes.
But I also tell my clients to take these too.
Good. Yeah. And there's a few more, kind of a few more blanket ones that I'll just mention quickly. One is magnesium. And I usually recommend a magnesium glycinate, which is good for stress and relaxation, sleep. And alcohol depletes magnesium. Magnesium is our body's relaxing mineral. If we are deficient in it, we will struggle with relaxation. So why do many of us drink? We drink to relax, or we drink to go to sleep. And so if you're someone who really struggles with the stress, the relaxation, the sleep element, the magnesium would be really beneficial for that one. And the last thing I'll mention is I do use a lot of things to help with cravings. So if people do experience really difficult cravings, it's that afternoon time, whenever it might be, I use a lot of amino acids for this. So things like L-glutamine and L-theanine, which can be really good when taken like as needed for a craving. So I talk a lot about these in the book, and even on my site and things, there's blogs and more content on that. And along with those supplement kits, if you're interested in, well, what are the right things for me? But the last thing I will say on this topic is that I run a lot of nutrient tests with my clients. So both my one-on-one clients, but also those in my online communities. And we like to look at where the deficiencies exist, because that's going to give us the best idea of what supplements we need and make sure that we're not just kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Got it. So maybe get an actual blood test, lab work done to kind of see where you're at and then see where you're deficient. That's what I would recommend as well. Do you ever recommend any like milk thistle or dandelion tea or that kind of thing?
I do, depending on, what's the goal, right? So a milk thistle I would use in someone who has maybe elevated liver enzymes, more concerns about the influence of alcohol in the liver. Maybe they have high cholesterol, which is associated oftentimes with liver dysfunction. So I would use milk thistle. Yeah. And I see you pointing that out, Susan. It's a big, big topic as it relates to alcohol, and alcohol being a contributor to high cholesterol. Those two things are not separate.
A lot of people don't know that. So now you know. Yeah. Actually, I always say it affects everything in your entire body, like everything.
The entire body. I mean, it penetrates your cells. So it is, it's going to have an influence on most everything. And that can feel overwhelming. But also at the same time, what it tells me and what it helps me share with you all is that the things that we experience in our body, in our health, the symptoms, the diagnoses, there's a chance that alcohol has contributed or played a role in that. And that's not to say like, oh, you did the wrong thing, you drank and now it created this imbalance. But it's more so to say, this is why I'm embarking on this alcohol-free journey, because I have this thing that I'm trying to deal with. And by eliminating alcohol, I'm making a huge stride toward improving that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So awesome. I love L-theanine. I take it. It does help calm. And I tell my clients, especially if they struggle with stress and they drink for stress, it's like, it's nature's chill pill,
That is the one I use specifically in clients who are like the anxiety driven drinker. So someone who is like, oh, I drink because like I have so much going on and I feel like this and I need to come down. That's the L-theanine for me.
Yeah. I take that too every day. Yeah. I really want to make sure we have time to talk about gut health a little more too, because that's so important. That comes up like so often, gut issues, and it's like a really hot topic. We've had other guests on our show. We talked about gut, and specifically, I would love to hear your take on it, the drinking, cravings, emotional stability.
Yeah. So the gut is over the last 10, 15 years or so. I mean, the big deal, the big kahuna, if you will, because it's in all of our conversations around health. It's been called the quote unquote second brain in the body. And that is because gut microbiome, the health of our digestion, influences our brain and influences all of the other systems then as well. So alcohol is very disruptive to the gut, really, really under-addressed topic. And I think under-addressed subject in people who experience digestive issues. So I can't tell you the number of folks I've worked with who have IBS, heartburn, reflux, constipation, some type of GI diagnosis. And their doctors never said, well, how much alcohol are you drinking? And the reality is that alcohol decreases our healthy probiotic bacteria.
Yes.
It decreases microbial diversity in the gut. It contributes to the breakdown of the gut lining, which is what we sometimes refer to as leaky gut. And as I mentioned with nutrients, it affects digestion and absorption of our food and our nutrients. So it is one of the worst things that we could consume for our gut health. And yet it's really not a part of the discussion on improving gut health.
Crazy.
And it needs to be. It needs to be. Because it is really disruptive. And I'll also just say for those who are on an alcohol-free journey, beginning, middle, whatever part of that journey they're on, if you have GI issues, any type of digestive diagnosis, there's a chance that alcohol has played a role in that. But there's also a lot that we can do to manage and support that. And sometimes we use things like digestive enzymes to help to repair the kind of upper part of the stomach if someone has more reflux, heartburn, bloating symptoms. But I also often use things like probiotics to start to restore that balance. But even things like increasing your fiber intake, it's not the sexiest. It's not as sexy as protein intake, but some say that fiber is the new protein, that it is kind of up and coming in its popularity. And the statistic is that only 5% of Americans get enough fiber each day. So that means
from fresh vegetables, right? Mainly, so I would like increase our vegetables,
veggies, fruits, whole grains, although I'm more of a fan of getting it from the fruits and veggies. But you can also incorporate in things like chia seeds, which are a really great source of fiber in just even a tablespoon. Toss it into your smoothie, put it on top of a yogurt, put it on a salad. Some people just mix it with water and drink it. But that is really, really helpful. And even taking fiber supplements are helpful too. And they make for really, really beautiful bowel movements. I love talking to people about poop. And Susan saw me speak live. So I usually like make the room say poop together so that we can like break the stigma. I love talking about things that make people uncomfortable, like alcoholism and poop.
That doesn't matter. We have lots of funny
topics.
We're lots of potty talk. Yeah.
I have one more question for you about this. What would you say is the amount of time to really allow your gut to heal? I was under the impression that it might take a full year of eating really healthy and protein and fiber. And like, how long do you tell your clients?
Yeah, it usually takes longer than we want it to take. I would say really to restore the gut microbiome and repair, depending on what's going on in the system, 6 months to a year. Sometimes longer, and that's okay. You know, wellness is a journey, not a destination. So we want to focus on improving the habits and, supporting the journey and choosing better foods and not making it like a short-term thing, but making it a lifelong change. And, that can look like a few different things. I do run a lot of stool testing on clients because it does give us a really good snapshot of what's going on. It tells us if the probiotics are low and which ones. It tells us if digestive enzymes are low and which ones you might need. It tells us if there's inflammation, if there's overgrowth of yeast or bacteria that we need to address with some type of herb. So getting the testing done, I always say, is the best way to really know and understand what's going on in your body. But again, you can try things like probiotic, increasing fiber, a few of these other tips and tricks, and you might find that those things make the difference.
I recently did some poop testing. Scooping your poop is not that fun, but it is fun. But good information, good results. Yeah. So
yeah, it is really, I think, gives people a really interesting understanding of the complexities of the gut. Yeah. It is not just this kind of put in a probiotic or don't put in a probiotic. There's thousands of different types of probiotics you can use. There are some that, we look at stool test and we might think, I have clients that come in and they've been taking probiotics for years, and we run the stool test and they have no growth of probiotics. And that means that we have to do a little bit of a workaround to get that restored. Or maybe try different types of probiotics. But yeah, you're going to learn a lot about the depth and the complexity through a stool test.
Wow, this has all been so amazing. And this is the time where I want to ask you, Brooke, because you're alcohol free and for quite a few years now. And you wrote this book. You're amazing. But what do you do in your life, your personal life, that really lights you up?
I love this question. I think I would have to say that really what helps me feel lit is just staying on this path of self-knowledge, of awareness, of personal growth. I am a big fan of reading about personal growth, partaking in meditation retreats, and doing things that connect me back to myself, because for all of those years that I was drinking, I was disconnecting. And I've always, even when I was drinking, I loved the personal growth element, but never felt like I could actually tap into it. And so I think for me, it's just being a seeker. It's always learning and doing better and really using sobriety and my alcohol-free life to fuel that and to enable that.
Thank you for
Love it.
sharing that. I'm so relate. And I just want to say that I'm so proud of you for sharing your story vulnerably, creating this book that is, again, How to Eat to Change How You Drink. I love this book so much, and I want everybody to go buy it. And thank you so much.
Yeah. I usually recommend it to my clients, and I've trained with Jolene Park. So I've been trained in some of the amino acids and some of the things to help boost the neurotransmitters. And it's amazing when a client comes back to me after trying something and was like, that made all the difference. It is so important, the nutrition and supplements, and you have recipes in the back.
Yes.
I'm looking at all my dog ears and I'm like, did I ever make that? All the things that I thought looked good. And yeah, thank you so much for what you've given this, the sober verse, as I like to call it, the resources that you've given us and how important it is to work with a professional around your overall health when you quit drinking. But that's the first step. Let's make it very clear that the first step is to quit drinking and then start resourcing your body to allow it to heal.
Yeah, it is really, I think, like the next level of your alcohol-free journey is tapping into this piece and really addressing the underlying factors that have contributed to why you've drank in the first place. And that's the other thing is it is a big kind of shift in the mindset when we realize that some of these imbalances could be the reason why we've struggled with quitting, and that by addressing them, it can really unlock these pieces that we've struggled with.
Yeah, it's part of staying stopped. There's getting stopped, then there's staying stopped. And it's also not your fault. If you're struggling with cravings, half of it is physiology. We always think, oh, what's wrong with me? There are resources and ways to really help that through supplements and nutrition. It's simple, but it's not easy. It really is the basics, going back to the basics: protein, hydration, and it's not like you said, sexy, fiber. Woo. I don't know which is sexier, fiber or protein.
I think protein is kind of like been notoriously sexy, but I think fiber is sexy personally.
I like my fiber supplement, I have to say.
And I'm going to try chia seeds. That was a great recommendation. Just a tablespoon, I'm going to do that. Brooke, thank you so much for coming on our show. And I know our listeners are going to get so much information from you, and I hope they go buy your book. And we will post all your information in the show notes so people can contact you and get your book.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here and with a lovely conversation. I hope we get to have another one soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Sober and Lit podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps get the word out.
And remember, do something today to help you feel lit.
See you next week.